Welcome to Medru. Topographic anatomy of the head. In this video we will study the Kronlein-Bryusova cranial topography scheme. The Kronlein-Bryusova scheme is based on the drawing of 3 horizontal, 3 vertical and 1 sagittal lines, which allows neurosurgeons to determine the localization of the injury or clarify the localization blood vessels, convolutions and ventricles of the brain. Median sagittal line connects the bridge of the nose and the external occipital protrusion. Frankfurt or lower horizontal is carried out through the lower orbital margin, along the upper edge of the zygomatic arch, and along the upper edge of the external auditory foramen. Upper horizontal is drawn through the upper orbital margin, parallel to the lower horizontal and zygomatic arch. Front vertical passes through the middle of the zygomatic arch, perpendicular to the horizontals and zygomatic arch. Medium vertical is carried out through the middle of the articular head of the mandible, parallel to the anterior vertical and perpendicular to the horizontals and zygomatic arch. Rear vertical is carried out through the posterior point of the base of the mastoid process, parallel to the anterior and middle verticals and perpendicular to the horizontals and zygomatic arch. The projection of the central, Roland, sulcus of the brain is a line connecting the points of intersection of the upper horizontal with the anterior vertical and the median sagittal line with the posterior vertical. True length of central sulcus between middle and posterior verticals. The projection of the lateral equals sylvian sulcus of the brain is the bisector of the angle formed by the line of projection of the central sulcus and the upper horizontal. The lateral sulcus is projected between the anterior and posterior verticals. Bryusova's horizontal is carried through the intersection point of the posterior vertical with the projection of the lateral sulcus, perpendicular to the verticals and parallel to the other contours and the zygomatic arch. The projection of the anterior cerebral artery runs along anterior segment of the Bryusova line. The projection of the middle cerebral artery coincides with the projection of the lateral sulcus of the brain. The projection of the posterior cerebral artery runs along posterior part of the upper horizontal line. The projection of the main trunk of the middle meningeal artery equals the spinous foramen through which the artery exits the cranial cavity, is the intersection of the lower horizontal and the anterior vertical. The projection of the anterior equals frontal branch of the middle meningeal artery is the intersection of the upper horizontal and anterior vertical. The projection of the posterior equals parietal branch of the middle meningeal artery is the intersection of the superior horizontal and posterior vertical. Bergman quadrilateral is bounded by the front and middle vertical lines, and the upper and lower horizontal lines. This quadrilateral is an addition to the Kronlein-Bryusova scheme, and is used to determine the site of craniotomy in otogenic abscesses of the temporal lobes of the brain.